In this episode, we're talking with David Sidoni from the American How to Buy a Home podcast. And we're going to explore how do real estate agents, or realtors as they're known over there, operate in the USA. Is it like we do here, or is it different? Is it true that sellers pay a whopping 5 to 6% commission on average? And if so, why would they do this? We'll also uncover whether it's true that every American property buyer is represented by a buyer's agent and that we're on the cusp of a revolution here as we follow suit or not. Since there's been some recent legal action, stick around as we get to the bottom of a whole host of misinformation.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
Hi, I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, currently ranked number 3 in the MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, everything we talk about today is not personal advice, and we recommend you engage the services of a licensed and experienced professional.
Our guest today is David Sidoni, who hosts the How to Buy a Home podcast in America. And long-time listeners may remember meeting David back in episode 259, where we explored the key differences between the two property markets, specifically looking at their big crash following the GFC, or the Great Depression as they call it. It's great to have you back on, David. Thank you so much for joining us. This is something that we hear all the time here. It's only a matter of time before every Australian uses a buyer's agent, just like they do in America. And I want to get to the bottom of what's happening over there and whether that's really true.
Well, I'm not sure what's going on over there, but if your real estate industry is built on collusion, corruption, and incompetence, then yeah, you're probably headed the same direction we are here in America.
Oh, dear. That's a great opening statement.
Oh, this is going to be interesting, David. Let's just explain how it works over there. I put my hand in the air, a little white flag, saying I've got no idea, and I'm probably naive and think that what's happening in the US is probably going to happen over here as well. So, what actually happens over there? Like, how does it all work with every transaction?
Well, like everything in business, you need to look a little bit at the business structure of the companies that do it to really understand it. But we'll fast forward. The sellers go to sell their home and they hire what we call the listing agent. Again, excuse me, I don't know exactly all your terms.
That's right. You use it and we'll interpret as needed.
Perfect. So the listing agent then will sign the prospective seller up. And at that time, the listing agent and the seller decide, okay, how much am I going to pay you to sell my home? And then how much are we going to pay to the buyer's agent that's going to bring a buyer to my home? Now, this was obviously created pre-internet, and it's typically, and again, typically is the key word here. Was not legal. It was not a mandate, but it was 6%. So 3% to the person that's going to sell your home, and then the seller from their profits gives 3% to the buyer's agent for bringing what we hope is a qualified buyer that will be able to complete the transaction.
Right. So, okay. Does that mean that, over here in Australia, if you hire a sales agent to sell your property, they've got a database of buyers that they've met through selling other properties, basically, and their office, depending on whether they work in a siloed sense or whether they work collaboratively, they might be able to share that database across their office or even across their network. Or they might not. They might have their own private database, depending on how long they've been in that market for. But a lot of sales agents here think they own buyers. They really think that they really peddle that database, saying, "Oh, I've got access to these buyers." But the reality is, the buyers, they don't belong to anybody, because they can go online and they can find out what properties are available. And in fact, they get on these agents' database, and the agent might market them some off-market properties. But at the end of the day, buyers aren't owned by anybody. So you're saying that over there, though, there's been this sort of system where buyers are effectively owned by buyer's agents?
No, until our lawsuit that happened last summer,
which we will talk about.
Yep. Buyers would just ask anybody, "Hey, you with a license down the street, go show me that home." And the buyer's agent would go, just hoping that the relationship would solidify and that they would want to write an offer on that home. So there were lots and lots of times that there wasn't a committed relationship between the buyer and the buyer's agent. But from what I'm hearing, outside observer, just listening, yeah, if I was the buyers in Australia, I would be in an uproar and saying, what the hell? The house is online. Why do I
Just go
need
and see
to
it.
have a pool of buyers when I'm hiring someone? The job, when I hired someone, I would think your job now is to put this up on this cool thing they have called the interwebs and show it to the world and get me the highest price from the best buyer. But again, that's just a dumb American talking.
So, David, do you have to use a buyer's agent? So, like, I drove blogs on the street. I walked past big for sale sign. Do I call the agent and say, "Hey, show me the place," or do I call the buyer's agent to say, "Hey, can you contact the real estate agent so I can show the place?"
So
I
you
can see
have the
place.
option in America to go directly to the listing agent. What
Okay.
we tell our consumers is, because in America we have the system set up, why would you go to the listing agent? Our listing agents are what we call farmers. A lot of times they take a geographic area, they plant all kinds of seeds, and they want to sell their home. Well, part of being a farmer and being the person who is the best agent in a one little area is that you sell the home for the highest price. So why would I drive by, call the sign, hire someone who has already been hired by the seller, who already has a fiduciary obligation to the seller, and that agent has a personal stake in selling the home for the highest price, when I have the option to call my friend who's a realtor and say, will you represent me in this home, in this potential purchase, and be my advocate? That's the way it works.
And because buyers haven't had to pay for that advocacy, that sort of it's made it burgeon, basically, that you can go, oh, well, why would I do it myself? I can get myself a realtor who's in this industry. But what I'm interested in then, a couple of things. Are there any states in America where an agent can represent both parties in the same transaction? Can the sales agent or listing agent also represent a buyer?
There are 18 states where it's illegal. So do the math from 50, and that'll let you know the 32 that aren't.
Right.
It's what we call dual agency. And I'm shocked that we're almost a year after our big lawsuit and that hasn't changed.
And we're going to get to that lawsuit. We are definitely getting to that lawsuit. Okay.
But I'm just thinking this as I'm working in the US market. I'm trying to buy a house. So if I don't use a buyer's agent, right, I know it's free, because it's already in the contract. Shouldn't I be a better buyer to the seller though? Because if I don't use a buyer's agent, you won't have to pay a buyer's agent. So where does that so shouldn't I be able to negotiate a 3% off the price, because they would have paid that price anyway to a buyer's agent?
Do you guys have for sale by owners over there where an owner doesn't use an agent?
Yeah,
there's a company
tiny.
called that.
Yeah.
Do you have the numbers? In the US, for sale by owners sell for 16% less than the market value if you had paid to use an agent. Same thing with, you know what, I want a deal, I'm just going to go to the listing agent. So what you're talking about is absolutely a strategy, and it most of the time doesn't work in your favor. You end up overpaying because we have multiple different levels, whether it's an inspection, whether it's an appraisal. So
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
Sure. And we get the calls from the cheapskates all the time.
Yeah,
I don't want to go. I want to see the house right now. I know you have 12 other offers that are coming in tonight, but I just want to use you so you can make the most money.
Yeah.
And sometimes the agents will say to the seller, okay, well, now you're going to pay me 3%, but I'm going to represent this person, and that's going to cost you another 2% for a 5% total.
And this is all in the dark, isn't it? So, because the reality is that the buyer wouldn't necessarily know what deals are going on in the background or what the agent would even add on to, or the fact is that you're assuming you can negotiate a better deal than the buyer's agent. But at the same time, is the buyer's agent really motivated to get you the best deal? Is the buyer's agent motivated? Because if they only get paid if you buy that property, then they're not really incentivized to try to get you the best deal, because if they sort of try to get the best deal and you miss out on that property, they're going to get nothing.
Yeah. And thankfully, we're one of the most litigious nations in the world. So the fear of being sued is something that keeps the buyer's agents up at night.
Yeah, I mean, but are the buyer's agents, so do they, if they say, for example, have 10 houses, right? So Joe Bloggs didn't call the agent, he called buyer's agent, who's a friend or someone they found online, right? Does that buyer's agent get 3% if they buy that house, 2% if they buy that house, 2.5% if they buy that house? Like,
Yeah. Is
Does
the
that
rate
happen?
different?
There's a difference. Home to home
Yeah.
to home. Whatever the seller is willing to offer to what we call the cooperating agent, the other side.
yeah, so that as a buyer, I'm like, look, are you trying to buy me the best property or the best price, or are you just buying the one with the highest commission? And then secondly, are they actually acting as true buyer's agents? Whereas in Australia, there's, a lot of debate around what's the right property, what's a good asset, like, because you're working 100% just for the buyer pays you, that's your client. Your job's not only to get for the right price or the best price, but also to get them a good asset, right? Do buyer's agents have that mentality, or is it really just you come to me and I get the deal done for you? Is that their mindset?
So you bring up an excellent point, and this all got solved by the changes that happened in the double, triple aforementioned lawsuit. So the free is no longer free. So
Right.
when you hire a buyer's agent right now, before the lawsuit, we were at 2.62% was a national average for what a seller was going to offer to give to the buyer's agent. The first 4 or 5 months after the lawsuit, it dropped only to 2.58. The only
Wow.
difference is it's not revealed. So what you were inferring there, or implying, God knows I can never remember, was like, would a buyer's agent only show all the 3% homes? Back in the day, heck yeah. They wouldn't, they'd show all the homes where they get paid more. Now, it's not revealed until the offer goes in.
Gotcha.
So you can't put it on the MLS. You could call and have it verbally done, but it cannot be out there physically printed anywhere. So
I'm going to hit
Yeah.
you with that MLS. So it's a multi-listing system, correct?
yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
the
no,
multiple listing
explain it,
service.
because we don't have that here. So can you explain how that works?
Sure. When you put your home on the market, the multiple listing service was the first internet service that replaced the big book. At the brokerages, there used to be a big old phone book with all the homes that were for sale. Well, then this magical computer came along, and then they created multiple listing service. And that's kind of the beginning of the chaos that's been happening. So on the multiple listing service, in the section that was private, just realtor to realtor, they would tell you this one's a 2.5% commission.
Wow.
And some realtors who were unscrupulous would only show people homes that way. Well, now that doesn't happen anymore. It's no longer printed on our multiple listing service, which is the Bible for what we do. But the other thing is, you go as a buyer and interview different buyer's agents. You might come to me and I might say, this is me. This is my track record. These are all the things I do that give you these wonderful level of service and you're going to be happy with. So we make 3%, regardless of what they're paying. So if they're paying 2%, you as the buyer are now paying me the extra 1%.
Right.
So it's
got it.
not free. So that is where, to answer your question, like you were saying, what incentivizes them? Well, now we set our own value to the buyer, and then we show them everything. And then once we get into the negotiations, we find out if they're going to have to pay extra because the seller is offering less than the agreed upon commission that the buyer and I have agreed to.
But is the mindset of the buyer's agents, like, are they playing like a trusted advisor role? Like, is it, oh, don't buy that property, it's on a really bad street, or it's got, really bad light, or it's got a really bad issue in the local suburb with, smells or something like that? Are they really like, picking good properties versus bad properties? Or is it like, no, you want that property, that's fine, yeah, let's do it, I'm going to go and try to get this deal done? Like, do they take that leap?
Well, like everything, there's always people that are unscrupulous and trying to push things through, but you don't last very long. The average American agent is 87% of our real estate agents, our estate agents, they quit in 5 years.
Let's get into that actually, because I was really fascinated. I listened to what sparked my interest in actually getting you back to chat about this was I listened to a Freakonomics episode, Freakonomics.
Oh,
the
yeah,
podcast,
love it.
Yeah. And they were talking about, the incentives of real estate agents. And to be quite honest, I think they got a lot of it wrong because they, typically, like a lot of people outside the industry, they don't really understand how the industry works. But what I was amazed at, so there's roughly 3 million people in the US that currently hold a real estate license.
That is
And-
correct.
And the total number of home sales in a year is around about 4 million. So your population is 330 million. That means that almost 1% are agents, right? And I'll compare that to Australia in a sec. And that means 1.3 transaction per agent per annum. That's not a lot, right? Whereas in Australia, we've got roughly 130,000 people hold a license, and that it does include property managers. So if we look at the total amount of people holding a license, we've got 27 million. That's 0.5%. So it's roughly half per person, per capita, agents. And we've also got 500 or a little bit more than 500,000 transactions per year now. So that works out to be 3.8 to 4 transactions per agent per year. That's a big difference. What's going on there?
71% of agents sold 0 homes in 2024.
Right.
What's going on is that the big brokers have created a business model that is a big ship and it's too big to turn around. The internet changed everything when the MLS, the multiple listing service, when everything became online. It should have changed. Instead, we have an extremely low bar of entry. My 18-year-old in uni could pass the test studying one night, and any idiot can get a real estate license. And the brokers make their money by playing a numbers game. So if you are a new agent, you pay half of your first commissions to the broker, 50%. They realize that 87% of them are going to wash out in 5 years. They also realize that they're going to come in and they're going to sell 3 or 4 homes to their aunt, their cousin, and their sister.
So
But
it's like pyramid scheme. It's like Amway.
Yep, it is. Totally is. So it's a joke. The bar is too low, and because of that, some smart lawyers figured it out and sued them and made a whole bunch of money. But the entire system is broken top to bottom. So your kind of 30,000 feet analysis, yeah, you're too right. You're exactly right. We have way too many agents. What are we at? We're at about 1 million listings right now. 1 million homes for sale, and we got 3 million agents. It's not hard math.
No. So, okay. And we're going to get to this legal case because it's actually really interesting. But I'm wanting to sort of set the scene first. So as Chris was asking earlier about what does a buyer's agent actually do here, sadly, we've got a low barrier to entry as well. We've got different problems and the industry is sort of bringing in I got a lot of buyer's agents who really don't know the first thing about property for starters, or negotiating with other agents, or working out what's a good asset, what's a bad asset, or how to work out the price to pay, or basic due diligence. There's just the list is very, very long. But however, there's a sort of a general understanding that a buyer's agent would take your brief, should educate you as to what the possibilities are for your search. They often don't. Many of them are order takers as opposed to advisors. And then if they're an advisor, they will advise you as to, where the compromises you're going to need to make, the consequences of making certain compromises, et cetera, and then get out there, find those properties for you, evaluate those properties for you, work out the right price to pay, et cetera, go to negotiate, and hopefully you get the right property, right price. That's sort of the general idea. Is that something that these buyer's agents do in America, or is it more, it's like, okay, well, when you find a property, call me and I'll get you in, and then I'll do a deal?
They could, they should, and most of them don't.
Right, okay.
On my podcast, I tell people you're looking for 2 people to work together for you, your real estate agent, your realtor, and your lender that's going to help you with the mortgage. You want them to know each other. You want them to work together. And I call them, most people, if you just go online and you select someone, you get a door opener. That's the realtor. And an order taker. That's the lender.
Right.
So again, just outsider perspective, here, if you're purchasing a home, you've got a safety net and that you can stay in it for years and years and years and keep the loan for 30 years. Where you guys have a difference, your buyer's agents almost need to be dual trained because they need to be fiscally, instead of just showing someone a neighborhood and opening doors, they either need to have the lender with them while they're looking at homes, but they need to be fiscally more savvy because you guys have a system that works where you have to understand the history and finances on a grander scale, because things could change and your rate could change far faster than it can here in the States.
Well, you should, but again, a little bit like in your situation, many don't. I think this idea of a door opener is interesting because it's like you don't need a door opener here.
Yeah.
And this is pitched to a lot of people who want to become a buyer's agent here. It's said, oh, look, it's just a matter of time. You're on the ground floor of a growing industry. Look, in America, everybody uses one. But if the expectation of what a buyer's agent does in America, how the buyer's agent is paid is different in America, even if you just got a top up to 3% commission, that's still potentially less or no commission that you have to pay. It does make it complicated. So that sales pitch of buyer's agents will be interesting. But it is a very different function. You don't need a door opener here. I mean, I guess this is why they pitch this off-market bullshit. But anyway, that's.
We're fighting about that too.
Are you?
Yeah, it's called clear cooperation and pocket listings. That's a big fight right now too.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just went on Zillow, which I probably shouldn't have, but I went on Zillow. I thought, well, what happens over there, right? I've never actually. It's actually number one, right? Is it Zillow's number one listing?
Correct.
Yeah. So. And you go on their site, and I went to San Francisco. I thought I'd look at a bit of property porn, so I went like 10 million plus. And there's some cracking properties. I could go into a rabbit hole here, but clicked on, and I was thinking, how could I buy this place, right? And when you click contact agent there, it says connect with a local buyer's agent, right? And request a tour. Then it says you could book in now, but it's with a local buyer's agent. So is everyone? You don't speak to a selling agent. Everything just pushes to a buyer's agent. And are you actually picking one, or is it like, has every property got 50 buyer's agents on it and everyone can open the door? Like, so you're just constantly chatting to a new buyer's agent, new buyer's agent, new buyer's agent. That's pretty painful.
David,
Zillow has been operating for 20 years and they are not making any money. And they have a bunch of VCs that venture capitalists that have put money into it because they're waiting for Zillow to someday do it. What Zillow does is they make idiots out there pay to be that person next to the listing.
Right. Got it. Yeah. Okay.
It has nothing to do with anything. They're not vetted. They don't have no area expertise, no nothing. Zillow's been doing that for 20 years and losing money doing it. And their expectation now is they've become a brokerage. They want to service buyers, sellers, give you the lender, and also do the title portion, the recording of the deed with the county and all that. They're trying to be the online one-stop shop for real estate, and Redfin and Rocket Mortgage just did the same thing last week, and Homes.com, who did commercials for our Super Bowl, they're trying to do it too. So in the next 10 years, there's going to be online people trying to take over the boots on the ground real estate industry, because the boots on the ground real estate industry has been working in a fog and are ripe for the pickings.
So on this place, I wouldn't, punch on the street, right? I've just landed off the plane into San Fran. I got to buy myself a home. I probably would click that button, if I'm honest, because I don't know the system, right?
Yep.
But what should I do? If I want to buy that place, should I be looking for a buyer's agent in San Fran?
Yeah, how do you find one?
What do I do?
Google San Francisco top real estate teams and interview 3 or 4 different buyer agents.
Now I'm with you. Okay.
Yep.
But how do you do that?
It's funny.
How do you tell the difference between a buying agent and a listing agent? Do they all do the same things for different people, or is there a sort of a demarcation?
People do both, and it truly comes to the consumer and their interview process in talking to people. Now, Zillow's going to show when you represented someone as a buyer or a seller in the States. So you can see that someone represented multiple buyers last year. But that's where there's a million ways for it to fall through the gap. But it's funny, Chris, you say that's what you would do because you don't know. Guess what Zillow's counting on? That's what half of America is doing because they don't know.
Yeah.
25-year-old kid doesn't know how to get a real estate agent, so they go on Zillow porn, click a face because it's right next to it, and it says featured, having no idea that that person just paid to be there.
Yeah. We have a number of players in Australia, which is clearly is a tiny market compared to America, are all trying to do similar things, trying to crack the same nut, and it's all just trying to grab a bit of money out of an industry. But it's funny when we were talking earlier about the amount of agents there and the amount of transactions per agent. Effectively, it's double that because you've got 2 agents on every transaction. So in a way, it's 2.6 transactions per agent. And the vendor's paying. And now the buyer's tipping in a little bit to that. I know that, I haven't watched this show for years, but I used to watch $1 Million Listing before I really, I don't know, my stomach started turning about it. They just seem to muscle their way into prestige houses and throw offers around without any obvious due diligence. And I know you differentiated between those that do a good job versus those that don't, but typically, would it be expected for a buyer's agent in the US to do price research and work out really in a proper research using data and evidence and work out really what a fair price to pay would be?
It would be expected, and unfortunately, when you are a first-time home buyer, you don't realize that you're receiving 10 or 15% of the analysis that you should be getting.
Right.
So I've just done that, David. I probably shouldn't be doing these things live on a podcast, but it's helping me understand it. So I did that. San Francisco buyer's agent, and then bang, it looked all these different, you got the big names, right? Sponsored on Google, but then you could find a list of top recommended buyer's agents. And, I just found one chap here, and it's doing all those things you spoke about, Veronica, data-driven insights, best price, best investment quality, researching, the builder. So it seems like there is a cohort of buyer's agents that see themselves as true professionals, trusted advisors, really running independent businesses that are built on, goodwill and trusted advice. And then there's maybe the million other buyer's agents out there that just got a license looking to clip the ticket. And so what happened with this lawsuit? I mean, we're 20 minutes in, so I don't think we should hold back any further. But what happened and how much did it change the landscape there?
So when you have an agent putting a home up for sale, another agent brings a buyer. Now, those 2 agents are not the people that are selling the home. The brokers are selling the home. So that's where we get into the silly part. So in America, you as an
you talking there's a listing agent, a buying agent, and a broker?
The brokers, we as agents all work for brokers in America.
Right.
So there's Century 21, there's, Real Brokerage, and there's EXP, and there's Keller Williams, and they have thousands of agents. I go and Keller Williams or Century 21 and David Sidoni present this home for sale.
Right.
So then someone from Real Brokerage comes over and writes an offer. Well, now it's Keller Williams and Real that are doing the deal, and the agents are just acting on behalf. So what happened was some attorney and a gentleman who had a plan, I'll get to that in a minute, thought that was collusion and that these 2 companies were colluding and price fixing and setting how much buyers and sellers would pay.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is price fixing the commission, not price fixing the actual property price. Yep.
Correct. Price fixing the commission. And price fixing how much the seller, and where it got really strange was they were like, well, now they're affecting the seller because no one cares about the buyers in any of the lawsuits. No one gives a damn. But if the seller starts at 6% and it's just because the industry says so, and they could somehow prove collusion, so the entire huge $5.1 billion lawsuit, of which they've got $419 million paid out already, just boiled down to you cannot put on the internet realtor service, the MLS, the multiple listing service, you can't say how much you're paying the buyer's agent because that's collusion. A week after the lawsuit was done and the National Association of Realtors and all the big brokers were out paying money, the guy who brought the lawsuit, and like the lawsuit is $200 million to the lawyers and like $28 to everybody else. It's what we call a class action lawsuit. They brought it in Missouri. It didn't happen in Missouri. Missouri is the home of the class action lawsuits, and anybody with legal expertise understands that. A week after they did it, the guy, the plaintiff, the person who brought the suit, opened a buyer's agent a la carte website where you could go and pay $75 to open a door and $350 to negotiate a contract. It was a freaking shakedown.
Oh,
but
wow.
the real estate industry is so stupid. God bless. I mean, it's run by people that played a numbers game, and the consumers are getting wise. I've been saying it on my podcast for 5 or 6 years. I am finally starting to see articles from the large real estate publications. The consumer is getting wise and they understand their power. And it's not just I can see homes on the internet. It's they understand as they get deeper into it how little the negotiation savvy is amongst the people in the industry. And this was just step one. Now, that guy and his whole little backstory trying to make his own website kind of knocked the wind out of the sails, but it could get ugly fast.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. You know, most people don't realise that they can cost themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars over the medium to long term when they make property decisions without all of the information that they need. And what I do is help people with tricky real estate problems, which often masquerade as simple questions like, should I sell my investment property because the interest repayments are hurting? Or should I buy before I sell? Or the other way around. You can connect with me and access all of the tools that I've created to help you make better property decisions at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you will find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program. You can connect with my Sydney-based property management and buyer's agency teams, Australia-wide vendor advocacy, or ask me for introduction to the small group of buyer's agents that I would personally recommend across the country. That's veronicamorgan.com.au.
If you're looking to buy your first home, thinking of upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and, importantly, get the finance right. Reach out via my website, alcove.com.au.
So that's fascinating. So he's decided he wanted to disrupt the industry, and in order to do so, you really have to undo that accepted policy, because it's the National Realtors Association, right? Is it called the NRA or NAR?
NRA is a different thing that we argue about. The
Yeah.
NAR is the
NAR.
National Association of Realtors.
That's right. Get it
So the
right.
National Association of Realtors and the NRA, the National Rifle Association, both of those have a bunch of lobbyists that go and do things, but on the back end, it just does nothing but cause problems in America.
Right. Okay, so the NAR, not
Yep.
the NRA, so NAR, the National Association of Realtors, that's who this lawsuit was taken against, wasn't it?
Them and a lot of other realtors
Right.
that were involved. And we've
Okay.
had splinters since then where people are trying not to use the NAR, but the NAR controls the MLS. You cannot, as a realtor, can't have access to the MLS as we play alphabet soup here. So you can't have access to the listings of homes unless you're part of this giant. And by the way, the NAR, it gets dues. So the more realtors they have, the more dues they get. Boy, I wonder why they won't change that crappy low bar of entry. The whole thing. And
So this is a monopoly in a way, which is sort
Very
of weird.
much.
You would not expect a monopoly in the US, such a big market. So the MLS, in a sense, is it's gatekeeping the access to properties that are available. So if you're a buyer's agent, you have to be a member of the NAR so that you can get access to the MLS, so that you can get that key and open it for your buyer's agent client.
yeah,
and-
but it's funny listening to your side. I'm like, the selling agents have their own gatekeeping. I have this group of buyers. I have this group
Not
of
really.
buyers.
I mean, they say that, but the reality is they don't, because we've got two major portals here,
Yeah.
and you can argue that's a duopoly, but you got two major portals. There's a bunch of little portals, and each agent has their own database and all the rest of it. But the reality is, if I'm looking to buy a house in any given suburb, I'm going to go online and I'm not going to preference. I don't want to look through each and every agent's website who functions in that area. I'm going to want to go to an aggregated site, right? So that's where what they're called domain and realestate.com.au here. And so the buyers aren't owned by anybody because that they are two publicly listed companies that, you know, which to be honest, when I look at some of the things that they're doing, I think they're trying to do a Zillow in some cases, but you know, that's another topic for another conversation. You know, because I see this opportunity to disrupt. Everybody's looking at the real estate industry, particularly in Australia, and thinking, how can I get my slice of a disruption pie? But this whole setup of the buyer's agency set up in America, this is such a good conversation because there's a lot of misinformation here around that, you know, and the simple fact is that it's been allowed to burgeon in a way, a little bit like mortgage broking here has. You know, 75% of people use a broker now, a mortgage broker, because the banks pay for that, you know, and I am a big fan of using mortgage brokers for lots of reasons, but I'm also a fan of user pays. So I get that there's a longer discussion around how that doesn't work here. Whereas in America, you can see that if the consumer didn't have to pay, but they're also locked out of the MLS, or they're locked out of the properties because they can't actually get an inspection without one, of course everybody uses a buyer's agent.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is you go directly to the listing agent, the sales agent, as you call them, and then you're in second position the whole time. No one is attempting to be your advocate because they want to sell the home for the highest price so that the sales agent can tell all the neighbors, see how great I did, and their fiduciary responsibility is to that original person who's selling the home.
Of course, but even if you've got a broker, they're still going to try and get the highest price out of your broker. So how does that differ?
Well, if I'm representing a buyer and I go in, I'm going to try to get the price down and get the best deal for my person. I'm also going to negotiate harder for credits after the inspection, or if we have an appraisal that doesn't work, because homes have to appraise to match the loan value for where we are. But truly, it's going to be very interesting to watch, because as you have these portals fighting it out and looking around like the rest of the world, there are some great speakers here in the States who I listen to who are watching you guys and watching Europe. And, you know, there was a great experiment 4 or 5 years ago when the market was post-pandemic called iBuyers, where the Zillow and Redfin and the big portals were saying, let us sell your home. We'll do it online. No hassle. Nobody has to come over, blah, blah,
No
blah.
COVID.
Yeah. Huge failures, multi-million-dollar failures. So they still haven't cracked the nut on how to sell a home online, but don't think they're not somewhere in the back room right now trying
to work it out. Yeah.
Just on that, I mean, I went through the rabbit hole of looking at fintech or prop tech, where it's basically disruptors, like you said. Which ones in the US are really succeeding? Because, there was a huge proliferation of that a few years ago. Is there any ones that have sort of been able to really crack it? You said Zillow aren't making any money, Redfin, etc. But I know there was a lot more trying lots of different things.
Yeah, everyone that's tried has failed. Just because they're not making money doesn't mean that they're not the big sites. No one is buying online directly. They are attempting to, but it's Zillow, it's Redfin, and we have a new thing called homes.com that I'm so curious to see what they're doing, because they're saying they don't pay, that you can't pay to be the person next to a property.
Right.
They only send you directly to the sales agent. So I don't know what they're going to do. Probably sooner or later, as the market starts to shift and it's harder to sell homes, they're just going to charge the listing agent to be at the top of the list, kind of like Google.
Well,
except
what we
they
have here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
do?
Yeah, let's get into, you can. I mean, you basically, you pay for your subscription to the portal, and you could pay extra to make sure that you're always at the top of the list. And, there's there's a premium paid there, and then you pass that on obviously to your vendors and say, right, well, the cost to go on this portal is X, and because I buy a premium placement, blah blah blah, so what I'm also fascinated is the behavior of buyers, right? Because the way I first interpreted the court case outcome, I thought, okay, what's going to happen now? Does that mean that buyers will now need to pay for a service? And the answer sounds to be like potentially, unless the listing agent negotiated a 6% commission up front where the seller pays for the buyer's agent. Maybe there's no commission paid there, but every buyer now needs to go into an agreement or enter into an agreement with a buyer's agent, which says basically you might be up for a percentage. It will be a maximum of 3, minimum of nothing, but somewhere in that scale, you're going to be up for something. And I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be until we start negotiating on the particular property, which is an interesting premise. And I don't quite know how that works. But, and so do buyers start saying, I don't want to pay for it? Like now, before I just that's just what you do because I didn't have to pay, and of course, why wouldn't I get a buyer's agent? But do they start saying now, I don't want to pay for that. I'm going to have a crack at this myself. I'm going to see whether I can do it myself. Or is it that the whole market is so trained that a buyer engages a buyer's agent that they just take it on the chin and continue as before, except that now there's a slightly different process in terms of how you engage a buyer's agent. You've got to sign an agreement, you've got to sign an agreement to pay, whatever it is, et cetera, et cetera. So the buyer's agent got to learn a different skill set. They've got to sell their services. They've also got to explain something, which is really hard to say, this is going to cost you, I don't know how much, so they've got to learn to sell better their own services. So that might cause a bit of a shakedown potentially, but are buyers behaving differently? Are they going, oh, bugger this, I don't want to pay? Or are they saying, okay, well, that's fine, we just have to pay now?
Well, first of all, no, they're not saying bugger this, and I wish they would. We need much better colloquialisms in America. But one of the things that you will see is it is definitely raising the service level of the buyer's agent. Mm-hmm. About, like I said, it dropped from 2.61 or 62 to 2.58. So it hasn't changed that much. So 90% of the time, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be a situation where, oh, okay, we want this house, but you have to pay for it now. Yeah. So 90% of the time, because the selling agent, the person who's selling the home, that agent wants to attract really strong buyers and make sure the deal closes.
And I would imagine, can I just chuck something in there? Yeah. I would imagine on a property that might be a little bit difficult to sell, all of a sudden the selling agent and the buying agent, and then doing a negotiation between them as to, okay, well, the selling agent says, well, I'll tip some money into the blah, 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 to sweeten the deal. So I imagine there's a bit of that going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of times when the market was slow, we'd start offering 4%, 5%, like, please bring me somebody.
Wow.
But to answer your question directly, what has happened now is because most of the time the lawsuit was BS and it's just the same type of thing, just without it being publicized immediately. Most of the time it's that. Mm. But you're right. Yes, the buyers might say, bugger this, I'm out. But what it is it's kind of like if you're going to look at a $400,000 home, and you go to an inspection and there's a $20,000 problem with the roof, well, then you have to decide, do I want to address that problem and fix that problem and continue with this home because it meets so many ticks so many other boxes? Same thing when you have to pay that difference now. Most of the time it's not going to happen, but if you happen to find the perfect home, so that's how it works.
Got it.
David, on the I think the mortgage market must work completely different. I mean, I know that fixed rates for 30 years is part of it, but I haven't really thought about the actual process when you buy there, because you mentioned something there and I thought, oh, that's weird. Basically, the bank approves the value that they'll lend on the property. So let's say that $400,000 property, you say, look, I want to buy for 400 grand. is the bank go and do its own valuation and often doesn't come up with this $400,000 valuation. It says, I think it's only worth $350 and I'm willing to do a loan based on $350. Is that what basically happens? And this is the rate I'm willing to do on that property given its risk, or is it, how does that all work?
Rate to risk doesn't happen. That
Okay.
happens on the insurance side.
Okay.
But the value that you're talking about, you have opened the appraisal can of worms. Appraisals happen in America by a neutral third party after the selling party and the buying party agree on a price. Then there is a contingency period, a buyer beware period, a time the buyer can pull out. Most of the time, that's doing the inspections on the property. The bigger one in the States is an appraisal. So you've got 17 days to have a neutral third party come out and say, yes, this home is worth $400,000. Give you some typical examples. If they come back and say $390, then it's one of three things are happen. The seller reduces it to $390 because that's all the bank is going to give this buyer. The buyer says, I've got an extra 10 grand. I will buy this home with a $390,000 loan, and here's my extra 10 grand, separate from the closing cost of the down payment. Or they split the difference. Seller reduces the price by $5,000. Buyer brings in $5,000. That's appraisals in a nutshell, but they change dramatically as markets go up and down.
Yeah, I was about to say, in a hot market, would the vendor sometimes say, well, okay, we're going to rescind the contract and we're going to go back to market? In a slow market, they're much more motivated to go, okay, well, I'll take 10 grand less.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
what did you call the Great Recession? I always forget what you guys called
The
it.
We call it
GFC,
GFC.
the global
So-
financial crisis.
So when the GFC happened, which by the way, again, much smarter, less narcissistic than America, who decided that we had the Great Depression in the 30s, and so this is just like that. Anyway, when that happened, the appraisal got separated from the lender. That was a good thing because there was a little bit of kickback and hand-holding and stuff going on there. But then what they did was they reduced how much money they make. So the appraiser for the process in America makes like a couple $100, and they control hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of value
Wow.
for properties. It's crazy. And they're the least, we talk about door openers and I mean, crazy.
That was exactly my next question. So you've hit it. So the appraiser isn't related to the bank. It's an independent company that they appoint to appraise it. Now they get paid a few $100s, right?
That's it.
That's similar to Australia. So when they go there and there's a contract for 400,000, like, is it 80-90% chance they're just going to walk in the door, take a few photos, hey, it's worth 400,000? Or do they say, no, I really reckon it's worth 380 and I reckon it's worth 410 or I reckon it's worth 420? Like, do they have flex there? Because in Australia, basically what they do is they'll go through, 400 seems fair, next property. And so they don't really put their personal opinion on. They just say, look, it's around that price. I haven't got time for this. Next property. How does it work?
It's if a property is listed for $403,000 and that's the negotiated price, shockingly, it will come in at $403,000 all the time, which obviously makes no sense. When there are a discrepancy, the appraisers tell us, I have to be able to justify this.
Right.
So it all has to do with the last three comps. So
Got you.
condos and suburbs are easy. Rural places, that's where you run it. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. They're just trying to.
It sounds the same.
Yeah.
It
The
sounds
cool
pretty
thing
much
is
exactly the same.
We do get over every once in a while, which is great when we bring our buyers in and it's
Feel good
420 and they
about
get a 425, you know?
Woo.
Yeah.
How good are we? What do you have auctions in America?
During before the GFC, and then all those companies went away.
Right. Okay.
when
so
we had a run up. But
So-
that is every time I listen to you gals and Chris, I listen to you sometimes too, but they do first time buyer stuff, and that's my world. I listen to the moms. I hear the auction stuff and my antenna go up. What is the deal? You guys have auctions all over the place.
Yeah, well, in some cities, it's a bit of an East Coast thing here, but yeah, and the valuers or the appraisers, as you call them over there, that's interesting because, typically they'll just accept an auction price as market value. But in reality, they should always go with the underbidder's price because there were two people prepared to pay that. Well, there's only one person prepared to pay the auction price. So it's a bit of
if
an
the deal
interesting
goes
logic
sour,
there.
you can go back to the other person. But if
Yes.
you take the highest price, you only got one bite of the apple.
That's it. So it does make me sort of laugh that the default is competitive price is accepted as reliable, whereas if you negotiate private treaty, there's a lot more variability in terms of the actual valuation versus what the price was paid. There's this, and it's quite difficult to get quantitative information here, like qualitatively and in terms of anecdotally, I've heard valuers talk about certain areas and certain buyers agents behavior in some places, for example, where there's inflated prices, and that put that down to buyers agents activity, which is terrible. Should be the opposite. And other times where individual properties have just been so off, just out of whack, and a lot of it around this professional advice too, because people will default to being advised and go, oh, okay, well, I'm paying you for advice and therefore that must be good advice. And often it's very ill-considered advice, which is a bit scary. And so the real test, I guess, is what the valuer says. And if there's a big discrepancy there, we've got a real problem. And so anecdotally, we've been hearing about that happening, but there's very little quantitative, I should say, evidence to support any claims in that space. And I don't know whether you have a tracking, if it's tracked at all in America, is it?
It's so interesting because it should be tracked a lot more than it is. But the value of the homes for us is so much more important because the refinance market, since everyone's getting a 30-year loan, the refinance market is completely dependent on the values that are set by the appraisers.
Right.
So
yeah.
if we've got shoddy appraising and people are all over the place, someone else has been in a property for 10 years and they're ready to refinance, but they can't because they're not showing. And then our investors who are trying to do a refinance where they take cash out of the home to buy something else, or someone trying to do a remodel on their home. The fact that everything is based on the appraisers and the appraisers are not a deeper part of the industry, they're setting the value for all these other gigantic financial transactions that will be a part of the entire fiscal picture, not just one home.
This is, and this is a really structural difference in your market to our market, in the sense that, when your interest rates fall or rise for that matter, then that would be a huge motivator or demotivator for a huge amount of people to transact. Like, why am I going to sign up for a 30-year mortgage at a high interest rate? And I imagine you can refinance and whatever. But I would imagine the market's really active when the interest rates are low because they can just lock in ridiculous long-term rates. I mean, post-COVID, like in the sort of 2021, 22, potentially, no, probably 21, 22, I would imagine the market would have been a frenzy.
Take 5 seconds and Google it. Since October, post-pandemic, highest value that we've ever seen. But October 2023, interest rates at 8%. So the term we have is called locked in. And it's exactly what you just described, Veronica. People are sitting on 3%. And since October of 2023, they needed to move. They had a pregnancy. They had something. Yeah, they can't or they won't. Because there aren't enough good agents out there explaining to them that the average American has $300,000 worth of equity. 50% of the people own the homes free and clear. And it's monopoly money at this point. It was $14.1 trillion worth of equity in the first quarter of last year that was happening.
Wow.
And so we're in a position right now where people can sell their home. And so on that next big home, you're going to put $300,000 down. Why don't you put $250,000 down and take $30,000 and buy your mortgage interest rate down, which you can do upfront when you purchase it.
Right.
And all of these things, but they don't even think about that. So they sit there. So we're sitting here right now with I went and talked to someone to help them sell their house this morning. And they were like, okay, so like what do you think? Like a month, a two? I go, a weekend. Our inventory is so low right now. I can
Right.
absolutely guarantee I'm going to sell this house in 6 hours.
Right.
3 hours Saturday, 3 hours Sunday. And the inventory is low because people are locked in. Veronica, you're
Yeah.
a genius.
Yeah.
Oh, I just
And it,
find
and
it
you say exactly.
fascinating.
So you go, if I upgrade from this house, and even though I need a bigger space, I need a bigger house for my family, and I've got this little 2-bed, and I've got 3 kids, but I'm locked in on such a good rate, 2-3% for 30 years. This is so cheap for me. If I sell, I lose that mortgage. I've got to then take a new mortgage out and pay 6% for the next 30 years. So people can't digest that move because it's so expensive to take on more debt, but then at a higher interest rate. Is that so basically people just stay Mexican standoff. I'm just going to stay here because it's cheap.
We're frozen.
Yeah.
We are
Gridlock.
we have been frozen since October 2023. And
Wow.
Yeah.
the sad part is the people with that short memory. And it's like, y'all
Recency
are
bias.
acting like this 2 and 3% comes around every 6 years. You're 40 years old. You know that doesn't happen. You know?
So
Yeah,
they're waiting. They're waiting for rates to go down to what they were post-COVID. It's like that was a one-off, guys. That
was
but what
saving
if
us from a global recession.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking though, like if I was an owner though, it depends. Can you get equity out, right? And then at that same interest rate, or you have to pay current new interest rates, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to pay new interest rates because that makes sense.
Mhm.
You'd have to pay, and that would probably be new interest rate on the whole amount.
But
Because it'd be like,
because if you do refinancing cash out, you do the whole thing over again.
exactly right. So it's a new loan. So people can't even get equity
They're
out.
not even investing.
And then, so the only way that they're ever going to move out is if they can afford to keep that property, as in make it a rental, and then have enough cash extra that they've saved up to be able to then go and borrow and buy something else. So you finding they're the only ones out in the market sort of trying to buy, besides first home buyers, the upgraders that basically can afford to keep their current property, their first property. They want to really try to hold that because it's such a good deal, right? Like they don't want to walk away from a 3% deal for 30 years. Like it seems so cheap.
People are making the choice to, again, if they've been in the property, if they were in the property for 20 years and were thinking about it in 2018 and 2019, well, now they've been in the property for 25 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so now at
small debt.
25 years, they might have $200,000, $300,000
That's it.
worth of equity. So
Yeah.
they'll accept that larger rate, but at a very, very small percentage of people. So
Gotcha.
I agree with everything you're saying, except that there are people that just go, forget it. We've had 2 kids. I don't care if it's at 2%.
Got to get out.
Yeah, no, you made a good point. It's all the ones that are cash buyers, the ones that have got lots of equity, but the person who's genuinely got a bit earlier in their life and they've bought the apartment thinking that they're going to go and just buy a house. They're like, oh, this is a big move. We might as well just suck it up and live in this little apartment.
Yeah, we call them the stepping stone people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people who bought it as a stepping stone, 18, 19, and 20, and if they didn't act in 21 or 22, they're a little stuck.
They're stuck on their first stone. As we say,
right.
stuck on the first rung of the ladder.
Yeah.
This has been
Property Dumbo.
Yeah.
Have you got one for us, David? Just a story. I'm sure you got 1,000 of them. They don't even have to be that complex because everything's a bit crazy for us over there. So,
Yes. About 6 months ago, somebody wrote in to How to Buy a Home and asked me for what I call a unicorn, because our buyer's agents are at the higher level, and so they're unicorns, saving people tens of thousands of dollars over the life. And because Home Depot are large, big giant hardware stores that fix it up, was offering $650 in a gift card if you went to the Home Depot little area and used one of their agents.
So it's like us Bunnings having real estate agents.
So somebody opted not to use. And so I was so flabbergasted by it that the next show I had a $650 raffle for anyone that would call in and ask to use and hire a unicorn agent. And my creative director, my video guy, who's 30 years old and poor, because I don't pay him enough, he put in $1. So we gave $651 to somebody else to kind of just reiterate the fact that hiring the best agent is something that's really important. And although you don't have that situation right now, I think your buyers are going to start to understand that they can do a lot of the research on their own and using those portals to find the best properties for them. And if they've got apples to apples, I bet you have buyers that are kind of playing one against the other.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And sadly, though, in our space and the buyer's agent side of things, that $650, I've seen some shocking, shockingly cheap deals offered to consumers to engage a buyer's agent. And I'm like, honestly, what do you think they're going to do for that? What do you think they're going to do? And if that is all they're worth, then why are you trusting them with the biggest purchase of your life? Like, honestly, I often see people at auction in particular, and I think to myself, and I can see that they've got their client with them, and I can see the way in which they're going about it, and I think that client would be better off doing it themselves. They're paying somebody to have a worse outcome, which is terrible. But it's that I reckon going to Bunnings for your buyer's agent would be definitely on that.
I can translate it this way for you, because you have a home inspection and the buyers pay for the home inspection, right?
As in a building and pest inspection, we call them. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, we call it a home inspection and a pest inspection, and because you guys talk about don't bring your dad to it.
Yeah.
the same Dumbo thing. I am shocked at how many people will look at 5 different home inspectors for a $400,000 home and go, well, I want this one. He's $100 cheaper than the other one.
Well, but mind you, and I guess we've got to wrap this up at some point. We could talk for hours, but at the end of the day, if you can't justify and explain your value proposition and justify why you charge more, then it is going to be a race to the bottom. And that's why, a lot of these buyer's agents that really can't do the job, they have to go cheap, because at the end of the day, it is all about price. And they fail to understand the real value in a true buyer's agent themselves, clearly. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to commoditize and cheapen the service. But anyway, all right. That's been a really interesting chat. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate your time. We're talking to you on Thursday morning. It's Wednesday evening there. We appreciate you staying in the studio for us.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.